Two racists decide to attack an elderly woman, thinking she's an easy victim. What they don't know is that her rescued dog is an ex-cop. This night will change everything. Will the loyal friend be able to protect his mistress? Emily Thompson had lived on the outskirts of a small town for nearly 40 years. Her modest home sat among a patchwork of neighbors who had come and gone. The neighborhood had changed over the decades, but Emily remained a constant presence. Her life was simple, steady, a quiet rhythm marked by morning walks, warm greetings, and the companionship of her dog, Max. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a large German shepherd with silver-tinged fur that hinted at his age. Emily had rescued him from a shelter 5 years ago, drawn to the intelligence in his amber eyes and the calm confidence in his demeanor. To Emily, Max was family. They shared everything: the morning strolls, the simple meals she prepared with care, and the peaceful evenings on her creaky front porch. One crisp autumn morning, as the sun cast a golden light over the cracked sidewalks and aging homes, Emily and Max set out for their daily walk. Max trotted beside her, his gait measured and purposeful. Emily carried a small cloth bag for bread, a ritual she cherished. She always stopped by the local bakery to chat with Mrs. Ramirez, whose warm rolls were as comforting as her conversations. As they rounded a corner, Emily noticed two men leaning against a car across the street. One was wiry with unkempt hair and a cigarette dangling from his lips. He nudged the other, a stockier man with a shaved head and a sneer on his face. They were watching her. Emily's steps faltered slightly, her grip tightening on Max's leash. Max sensed her unease. His ears perked up, his body tensed, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "Easy now, Max," Emily murmured, giving his neck a reassuring pat. But her eyes lingered on the men, their sharp stares and whispered words unsettling her. She quickened her pace, and Max matched her stride, his gaze flicking back to the figures until they were out of sight. At the bakery, Mrs. Ramirez greeted her with a cheerful smile, oblivious to Emily's unease. The familiar warmth of the shop should have soothed her, but she couldn't shake the tension in her chest. Even as she exchanged pleasantries, her thoughts kept circling back to the men on the corner. On the way home, Emily glanced over her shoulder more than once. The streets felt quieter than usual. The rustle of leaves seemed too loud. Max stayed close, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced with something sharper, more alert. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She was being silly, she thought, letting her imagination run wild. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across her yard, Emily found herself checking the locks on her doors. Max sat by the window, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the darkening street. Emily watched him, her chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "Max, you're making me nervous," she said with a soft chuckle, though her voice wavered. He didn't respond, his attention unwavering. Emily shook her head and retreated to the kitchen, convincing herself it was nothing. Yet, as she washed the dishes from her modest supper, she caught herself glancing toward the window more often than she'd like to admit. The next morning, Emily resolved to shake off the unease. Life was too short to waste on unfounded fears. She donned her coat and hat, Max wagging his tail as she clipped on his leash. They stepped out into the brisk morning air, and for a while, everything felt normal. But as they neared the corner where she'd seen the men the day before, her steps slowed. The car was gone. The street empty, except for the occasional jogger or cyclist. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Max, however, remained on edge. His ears flicked at every sound, his nose twitching, as if searching for something Emily couldn't see. She gave his leash a gentle tug. "Come on, boy. Let's not borrow trouble." The bakery was its usual lively self, the smell of fresh bread wafting out to meet them as they approached. Mrs. Ramirez handed Emily her usual loaf with a kind smile and asked about her children, her questions always filled with genuine concern. Emily answered politely, but kept the conversation brief, her unease returning, a gnawing sense that something wasn't quite right. On the walk back, Emily noticed Max stopping more frequently, his head swiveling as if to track an unseen presence. When they reached her gate, she glanced over her shoulder one last time, her heart skipping when she thought she saw movement near the corner of the street. But when she looked again, there was nothing there. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of her old house and the faint rustling of leaves outside. Max was a silhouette in the doorway, his broad frame backlit by the moonlight streaming through the hall window. He was watching, waiting. Emily sat up, her chest tight with worry. She told herself it was just the wind, the normal noises of the night amplified by her anxiety. But deep down, she knew better. Max wasn't a skittish dog. If he was on edge, there was a reason. When morning came, Emily felt a heaviness settle over her as she stepped out onto the porch. The neighborhood looked the same, bathed in the soft glow of sunrise, but it felt different. She glanced at Max, who was sitting by her side, his eyes scanning the street. He didn't look at her when she spoke. "What do you see, Max?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "What's got you so worked up?" He didn't answer, of course, but the growl that rumbled low in his throat sent a chill down Emily's spine. The morning sun cast long shadows across the living room as Max lay by the window, his gaze fixed on the quiet street outside. Though his eyes seemed to watch the neighborhood, they were far away, drawn into memories of another life. Once upon a time, Max had been more than just a family dog. Before he became Emily's faithful companion, he had a job, a purpose. He was a police dog, an officer with duties as important as any human member of the force. His days were filled with training exercises, patrols, and moments of intense action. He remembered the adrenaline that coursed through his veins when he detected danger. He recalled the scent of fear, the commands shouted by his handler, Officer James Miller, the way he would spring into action without hesitation. It had been during one of those long nights on a routine patrol that everything changed. Max had been riding in the back of the police car, Officer Miller at the wheel. They were patrolling a quiet area much like Emily's neighborhood. Streets lined with old houses, their windows dim, sidewalks empty. Nothing unusual until a call came through the radio, robbery in progress, an armed suspect on the run. The excitement of the pursuit filled the car, and Max sensed it in Miller's voice, the way his heartbeat quickened. They arrived at the scene, a narrow alley where the suspect had been cornered. Max could still recall the metallic tang of the gun, the pungent sweat of the suspect, and Miller's calm determination. The suspect turned, knife in hand, and everything happened in a blur. Max was unleashed, moving fast and low, his focus solely on disarming the threat. He heard Miller's shouts, saw the knife glinting in dim light. He lunged, sinking his teeth into the suspect's arm, just as the man swung toward Miller. He protected his handler, saved his life, but it came at a cost. The suspect's knife sliced deep into Max's hind leg. The pain was searing, but Max didn't let go. He clamped down until the suspect was disarmed and subdued. He remembered Miller's voice calling his name, hands stroking his fur, telling him it would be okay. The days that followed were a haze of hospital smells and pain. The department hailed him as a hero, but the injury left him unable to continue active duty. Max was retired, placed in a shelter for aging police dogs, a place filled with echoes of what once was. Too many dogs, too few willing to take in aging heroes. Emily stirred, opening her eyes. She sat up, heart pounding. She heard it too, a soft scraping, like metal against metal. She moved to the hallway, seeing Max standing rigidly near the front door. She placed a hand on his back. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. A loud clank echoed, the sound of the lock being tampered with. Emily felt panic rise within her. The door handle jiggled, metal shaking. Then, with a crack, the door was kicked open. Emily screamed as two men burst into the living room. They wore dark clothing, faces partially obscured. The wiry man sneered at her. "Stay quiet, lady," he snarled, brandishing a crowbar. Behind him, the stocky man stepped inside, eyes scanning the room. Emily backed away, hitting the wall. Max didn't hesitate. With a snarl, he lunged at the intruders, jaws snapping around the arm of the man with the crowbar. The man screamed, dropping the weapon as Max dragged him down. "Get him off me!" he shouted. The second man rushed forward, trying to kick Max off. Max released his hold to dodge the kick, then turned on the new threat, barking ferociously. The larger man stumbled back, shocked. They hadn't expected this. Emily, shaking with fear, grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "Please, someone's breaking into my house," she whispered, voice cracking. The man Max had bitten was trying to crawl away, arm bleeding. The larger man grabbed a chair, swinging it at Max. Max dodged, his teeth snapping as he went for the man's leg, clamping down as the man howled in pain. Emily could hear the dispatcher, but the words didn't register. All she could focus on was Max, defending her with everything he had. Tears filled her eyes. The sound of sirens in the distance cut through the chaos. The men exchanged a glance, fear overtaking their expressions. "Let's get out of here," the larger man shouted. They bolted for the door, stumbling in their haste. Max lunged after them, but Emily called out, "Max, no!" He skidded to a stop, eyes fixed on the retreating figures. He let out a low growl, chest heaving. Emily rushed to his side, pulling him back inside. The police arrived moments later, lights flashing, officers rushing in. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one asked urgently. Emily nodded, tears welling. "He saved me," she whispered, looking at Max. The officer glanced at Max, then knelt down. "You did good, boy." Max didn't relax until the officers secured the area. They stayed for a while, making sure Emily was safe. Before they left, one handed her a card. "We'll have patrols in the area. Call if you see anything." When they were alone, Emily knelt beside Max, cupping his face. "Oh, Max, what would I do without you?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. Max looked at her, eyes softening. He leaned into her touch, letting out a deep sigh. Emily held him close, her body shaking with sobs. She knew she owed her life to Max. As she held him, she promised herself she'd do whatever it took to keep them both safe. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Emily couldn't sleep. She stayed on the couch, Max by her side. As dawn broke, she finally closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her into a restless sleep. Max stayed awake, knowing the danger wasn't over. In the morning, Emily called her son, Michael. She needed to hear his voice. He was alarmed and insisted on coming to stay with her for a while. Over the next few days, they reinforced the house, new locks, security cameras. Michael helped her feel safer. Max remained vigilant, but his tension eased slightly. One afternoon, a police officer named Officer Harris visited. He told Emily that Max's actions were heroic and that the department wanted to honor him. A week later, Emily and Max attended a small ceremony at the police station. Max was awarded a medal for bravery. Emily's heart swelled with pride as she watched Max receive the honor he deserved. That evening, back home, Emily and Max sat on the porch. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow. She reached down, running her fingers through his fur. "You and me, Max," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with loyalty and love. His tail thumped gently against the porch. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. With Max by her side, she knew she could face anything. Together, they had faced danger and come out stronger. As the stars emerged, they sat in comfortable silence, the unspoken bond between them stronger than ever. The darkness had come and tested them, but together they had won.